Greetings and welcome to the introduction to astronomy. In this week's exploration of the solar system, we are going to look at the Galileo spacecraft and what that studied. So the Galileo spacecraft we can see here in an artist's conception was launched on October the 18th of 1989 by the space shuttle Atlantis. So it was sent off into space and it took a rather roundabout trip to Jupiter, which is its primary mission. It actually flew by Venus and Earth first. And we can take a look at that orbit that it took. And it's a very unusual one in that we see here that at first, as it launched Earth on October 18th of 1989, and then traveled into Venus, passed by that in 1990, came back to Earth in 1990 and again in 1992, before heading out and finally arriving at Jupiter in 1995. Now, why would it do that? Well, that's a way to get a gravitational boost. You can use the energy of the planet and its gravity to accelerate the craft and to push it on to get there faster. And it can save fuel by using the natural gravitational energy of a planet. Now on its way, we can also see that it flew by a couple of other objects, and one primary one is marked here, and that is Ida. And Ida it flew by on August of 1993 and gave us some of the very first close up images of an asteroid. Now Ida up at the top we can see with its small moon, as well as Gaspra, another asteroid that the Galileo craft flew by. So as it was flying out to Jupiter, its orbit allowed it to be able to visit two different objects and give us views of asteroids, something that is very hard to see from Earth because we see them only as dots of light. In December of 1995, Galileo became the first craft to orbit one of the giant planets. Now, if you've heard my previous discussions, we'd certainly visited Jupiter before, as well as Saturn. But this was the first time we had actually gone into orbit around one of those. And it visited and observed Jupiter as well as its moon system, as we can see here, giving us some close up and detailed views of not only these four large Galilean satellites that we see here, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, but also some of the smaller moons of Jupiter as well. Now, one of the things it also had was an atmospheric probe. And the idea of an atmospheric probe, as you might guess, is to study the atmosphere of Jupiter. And this was actually the first time it was directly studied. So it had the main portion here that had the antenna to be able to communicate back. It had a cover on it and then a heat shield to allow it to decelerate into Jupiter's atmosphere and then to be released. And as it descended, it was able to record things like the temperatures, the pressures, detect lightning, detect the compositions of the various layers of the atmosphere, and radio that information back to the waiting Galileo satellite up in orbit and then be transmitted back to Earth. And really, this gave us our first direct study of the atmosphere of Jupiter, or of any of the other giant planets. It was the first time we had actually been inside one of those planets. And while the craft did not make it very far down, because the pressure gets very strong very quickly within Jupiter, it was a good amount of information to be able to learn more about the atmospheric effects on the giant planets. The mission did end on September 21st of 2003, which was when the craft was directed to fly into Jupiter. So in order to avoid possibility of contamination, it was crashed into Jupiter, allowing it to be destroyed, avoiding contamination with the moons. So let's go ahead and finish up with our summary here. And what we've looked at today is the Galileo spacecraft, which was designed to study Jupiter and its moons, although it did fly by two asteroids on the way to Jupiter and had a probe to study the atmosphere of the giant planet. So that concludes this week's exploration of the solar system on the Galileo spacecraft. We'll be back again next week for another exploration of the solar system video. So until then, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.